Ready? Yeah. All accounted for?
Yep.
Stand for the pledge flag. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to now have a roll call for the work session.
Mr. Anizio?
Present.
Dr. Cooper? Here. Mr. Crawford?
Here.
Mr. Knick? Mr. Lawler?
Here.
Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Ricotta? Here. Mr. Salvo?
Here.
And Dr. Serino.
Here.
Sorry about that.
Superintendent's agenda?
Before I present my agenda, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tom Malone from the Malone Company. We'll do a presentation about our upcoming 2021-2022 budget.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Just to give you a little bit of timeline, what we want to do this evening is it's time, that time of the year where the district will adopt what's known as its proposed final budget. It's usually the second part of the phase of the budget process. In January, a district decides whether they will potentially raise property taxes above the index. If that's not made, that decision, what happens next is what we are in right now, adopting the proposed final budget. This budget will stay on display for 30 days. It needs 30 days between meeting dates. It will be publicly displayed for 20 days and then duly advertised 10 days before our final adoption. So we're right in the middle of the process. I would just caution that tonight's vote is proposed and non-binding. If a district decides to do no millage, they still have the option to do up to the index. If we do millage tonight, you also have the ability to roll it back. So it's non-binding. What our firm has done has put together about a 7-page PowerPoint presentation that I know members that are present have available in front of them and I believe is being displayed online. So we're going to get right into it. Hopefully it won't be as detailed as perhaps our final will be. But if we go to page 2, one of the items that we've added for districts on page 2 of the PowerPoint is a little bit of a history of our fund balance activity. We often refer to it as the financial report card of the district. It's used, sometimes referred to as the savings account. A fund balance is basically, after a year concludes, how much money is left with the district after an accumulation of revenue and expenditures. We're simply displaying this from the year 1213 to the year 1920, prior to the last column. And if you go to the very bottom, that's the roller coaster ride of the fund balance of the district. And through no fault of anyone's, there's just different economic conditions that happen each year. And if you look at that bottom in 1415, the district had a fund balance of about $1.3 million. Then, if you look at 1718, the district at a high water mark was at about $7.2 million. And a lot of things have an impact on that. State funding, the economy certainly, but once again what it does is it takes your revenue less your expense, indicates what's left at the end of that particular fiscal period, and gives somewhat of a balance to roll forward. Very important for when we go out for bonding, to do bond issues, items of that, it really is a report card on your solvency. If we look in that second last column of 1920, you could see the district at the end of your last fiscal year, which I believe Mr. Alicini was here either last month or the month before, reported the district was in very good financial shape and had a fund balance of about $6.8 million at the end of 1920. That's the second last column. So 6.8 is very healthy at that point. The far right-hand column, what we're trying to do is take you through the 2021 year, the current year that we're in now, that will conclude at June 30th. And the budget that you had adopted last year indicated a shortfall, if you stay in that far right-hand column, of expense over revenue about $1.4 million, and that would be funded exactly for what a fund balance is intended to do. Your reserve would normally take care of that shortfall. What we want to do is comment a little bit, I think before we look at our spending plan for 21-22, I would like to talk a little bit about what we're seeing happening in 2021. If we go to page 3 of the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to talk about it in two facets. If you go to the numbers on the right-hand side of the proposed final budget, again, two items need to be, I think, discussed. This initial presentation contains no property tax increase for the 21-22 year. It also does not include any potential increase from state sources, whether it be our basic education or special education funding. I'm sure as many of the members are aware, those budgets have not yet been passed at the Commonwealth level. So we're anxiously awaiting to see what may occur at the state level and what the school may be a recipient of, but it's our firm's nature to be very conservative. So absent of that information, there is no increase in here for the 21-22 year. And again, no tax increase. So if you look at the far right hand, and when we get to page 4, I'll give you more in comparison, but the executive summary is about $54.3 million of revenue on page 3, broken down into local, state, and federal sources, $55.4 million of expense. What we're looking at in 21-22 is a shortfall of about $1.1 million. And then, again, someone would ask, well, where would that shortfall be funded? And what we're anticipating, and I want to spend just a few moments to talk about 2021, we're anticipating that the fund balance will stay intact, was in place for 2021. We think that we'll maintain that. Despite last year adopting a budget that had a shortfall of about $1.5 million, what basically happened to the district, and these are some of the things why 2021 is so important in developing your 21-22 plan. Last year at this exact same time, the boards, through our firm and through the state, were getting direction that because of COVID, being right in the middle of that economic uncertainty, you'll recall our firm put up a slide where we discounted large amounts of local revenue. We were told that the uncertainty of the economic conditions, that there was going to be a challenge in collecting property taxes, earned income taxes, transfer taxes. So as instructed and in a conservative nature, we discounted those revenues, and last year you adopted a spending plan that was about $1.4 million short. What I'm here to tell you is for 2021, as we know as of April 30th, may change by next month when we come back for our final, we feel extremely confident that you've eliminated that shortfall of last year of 2021. We're already seeing a large uptick in the property taxes that we discounted last year. We've more than made up for that revenue piece that came in. So the economy within the Pittston area school district remained very strong through that period. They also talked to us about reducing other type local taxes, transfer taxes when property exchanges. We did that per state guidance. The district was the recipient of a very large transfer tax. I believe it's Ball Metal Beverage Container Company that closed in Jenkins Township. That alone brought in approximately over $400,000 of transfer tax. That alone alleviated that discounted number that we had. And then we've also had modest increases in other line items. We are withholding to see whether our earned income tax will bounce back. Right now, we think we're well on our way to surpassing the budget at that point. So that's the positive. In 2021, we've replaced that deficit simply by enhanced revenue. At the same time, we've worked with your payroll department. Lisa Rinelli has been extremely helpful with this, and we're projecting out because during these times, you also tend to see change in salary and benefit line items. And the district was no different with that. We did have some modest changes due to realignment and scheduling changes, and we think we're going to have some positive variances in our salary line item. We also had a number of people exercise sabbatical and maternity options, and that helped towards a positive variance for the district. The only negative that we see that offsets that amount, and why you don't see that amount right now being larger, is we did experience, and we've talked to the Superintendent Booth about the increase in charter cyber school that has happened as a direct result, we believe, of COVID. We budgeted about $1.1 million for the prior year, and we think that's going to come in somewhere closer to about $1.9 million. So there's about an $800,000 increase in our charter cyber. And I can share with you, we're not only seeing that in Pittston area school district, but in many of the districts that we perform services for. Matter of fact, I'm not sure if we have any district that is within budget, but rather north of their budget amount. So the moving parts that we're talking about is we had great revenue enhancement, we had some salary positive things happen, but we gave back some of that money because of increased charter cyber. So at this point, we've added back enough to offset your shortfall of last year. And the last item that we'll report on is June, your last one is your performance on your health care plan. We're almost a version of being self-funded, but we've gotten some good results that, again, in the 2021 year, the district has performed very well on the health care side. We will, again, that was as of April. We know how tenuous health care is. We're just hoping for no reversal there. And that could have, again, a significant impact on what our fund balance is we end this year with, which is very important to what we begin with next year. Page 4 is where I'm going to take you when we just look at a little different. The last slide that contains a lot of numbers is we took our 21-22 year and put it side by side by our 2021 year. And we simply want to share with you there some of the variances that we're seeing coming through, and I think that the board needs to be aware of. In the revenue side, you could see local tax revenue, despite no tax increase, elevating by about $1.7 million. That's all of the items that I talked about that we reversed or discounted off last year. We feel comfortable, not only did we make up last year's amount, but we will also be able to add those amounts to your 21-22 year. So we've reinstated local revenues to the tune of about $1.7 million. Very positive. State revenue, as I mentioned, nothing yet out on that, so we've kept that pretty much flat. And then your federal sources, right now you see a reduction of $1 million. That's basically what we've decided to do for the proposed final is roll off the ESSER 1 funds that were incorporated in your last year budget. And we will come back in June and find out what we will add for ESSER 2 and 3 in your final budget for your June 30th period. And the reason on that is we have some discussions going on with the administration as to how much we're going to use of that and in what fiscal year. ESSER 2 has the ability to be utilized through 9/30/23. ESSER 4, I believe Kevin is able to go till 9/30/24. So we're trying to put a plan together to even out those funds, and we really want to make sure those funds are designed not to be utilized for reoccurring costs, because that money will eventually dry up or being taken out of the funding stream. So we want to be extremely cautious and use that for non-reoccurring items that are allowed within the plan. In the expense section, just some items, you see some unfavorable variances there. We have the normal increase in salaries and benefits. The only comment that I'll make on salaries is this presentation does not contain settlement. There are some collective bargaining agreements that we're currently in the process of talking through. We have a professional contract which expires in August. We also have portions of our support contract that expires. What is in here is the Act 93 and maintenance contracts that have been settled. So in full disclosure, though that amount expenditure line item does not include that. You see the benefits escalate by about $492,000. What we've currently used, which may change in June, is about a 10% increase for health care. We're tearing that apart to see if we can minimize that, and after some initial meetings with our provider, 10% may be able to be reduced somewhat. You go through some other line items. There's a line item, other purchase services, that is going up by $395,000. What we've reinstated for tonight's meeting is 1/2 of the charter school cost. I talked about it being elevated by about $800,000 during the 2021 year. What we've decided to do, at least for right now, and only tentative, is add back 1/2 of that cost in a hope of recapturing 1/2 of the increased cost. That again will be analyzed, and it's a very difficult number to be able to get your arms around, but that's our first try at that. And then the last one is you see a reduction in supplies. We said that we removed the ESSER 1 revenue up top. We also want to remove then the ESSER 2 supplies that were utilized to offset that. So that remains revenue and expense neutral. And then if you look at 21-22, that is indicating again expenditures over revenue of about $1,149,000 that will be absorbed currently by our fund balance projection. Just want to try to sum up on the last few pages for you, and then we'll entertain some questions from the board and or the audience. Page 5, if we look at that, this is really the summary, what you're looking at for 21-22. There'll be potentially a motion to set your expenditure number and your millage number. If you do that without raising millage, you'll have revenues of $54.3 million versus expenses of $55.4, creating a deficit of about $1,149,000. However, offset by a very strong fund balance of $6.8 million to leave us at the end of 22 at about $5.6 million. The only caution that I say is, as we come back again over the next 30 days, and that's why I really believe it's referred to as proposed. A lot of things happen within the 30 days, not only from the state level, but the district levels. You'll be seeing some budgets that are being submitted by the CTC, the intermediate unit, and they're all on the same fiscal June 30th year. So as we gather that information, we add that to the proposed. Page 6, just as a reminder of what we have included and not included. And again, I'll verbalize some. What's included is we did reinstate all of the pre-pandemic funding that we originally took off. That's a really good number in terms of our local revenue, and we've performed very well on there. We've already, and has spoken to you about, we've estimated some fund balance adjustments about hopefully, and we think doing a little better on breaking even on your fund balance for the current year we're in through April 30th. What's not included in the spending plan is any local tax increase. We have not put any potential state tax increase. We do note that the governor's proposal in February for Pittston, though, noted, and again, we don't know if this will come to fruition, and usually it's something south of this number. Basic education funding was scheduled on Governor Wolf's proposal to increase by about $316,000, and special ed funding $95,000. We'll all stay tuned to see what eventually comes to the district. Again, we've only allocated 1/2 of the cost of some increased charter cyber, and we have not yet determined the usage and the timing of ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. ESSER 2 funds will be about $3.4 million once we make application, and we believe the ESSER 3 funds will be about $6.7 million with those uses to be determined. Lastly, on page 7, is simply for point of reference. I think it's our due diligence to let you know what the index, the ramifications of what the district is allowed to do can certainly do 0 in property tax increase, and the highest amount that we can do is 3.9 by law as applicable to our district. If the district, for some reason, some way wanted to raise to the index, I think for informational purposes, that generates about $1,025,000 in additional local revenue. So we simply, for a visual, show that without the zero increase, the district would end in column 1 with about a $5.6 million fund balance. And then for 21-22, if for some reason we did the index of 3.9, the revenue, or the expense over revenue would reduce to $123,000, and we would be left with about a $6.7 million fund balance. The last thought that I'll leave you with is that this is just, there are very many moving parts in this year. It's not only the 2021 year because of all the maneuvering on the financial side for COVID-19, but it's the same with trying to figure out the spending trends along with the anticipated revenue on that side. So realize that there's a lot of numbers there, went through it fairly quick. We'll just pause, and Dr. Serino, if anyone has any questions from the board level, and then we usually defer to the audience, I'm certainly available to do that.
Any questions or comments from the board? I'll do that. Just to make a point, it seems like a budget seems to people that aren't involved with board affairs is something that happens once a year for a week. Well, it's not. It's every day of the year, the conversations. Our administration is constantly updating the board where we're at. When we're making decisions about to add something or what we're going to purchase or what we're going to do, it's cross-checked against our budget. And before we spend something that's not allocated, and it may be necessary, the discussion is had from the administration to tell us where we're going and what we're doing. So I commend the board, those that have been here a while, for taking the due diligence that they have to put us in the kind of financial situation we're in. I don't want to gloat about it, and I'm not here pushing it. I think it's just sound that if every district could have gotten the types of breaks that we got some breaks. Yeah. Would love to be in the healthy situation that we're in. And our job, and Kevin and John are constantly on this, is try to maintain the stability through rough times when revenues and expenses aren't as easy to determine as they were when things were just copacetic and going across the board. So in this next month, will be a lot of conversation and a lot of questions.
I think your comment is timely, because that is absolutely true. The budget process, and I failed to, Al and I get the opportunity to present, but Sherry Petriconis from our office has been on this from beginning. She has a full presence in the Pittston area. Your payroll department, human resource department, began to feed us numbers in November of last year to project this 21-22. So you're absolutely correct on the moving parts, and it's been more strenuous than ever before because of all of the challenges that are out there. But I think we're well prepared.
And the only other comment I'd like is to thank you and your firm, obviously, and Albert, for the amount of time and effort that's
Tough
been
act
put
to follow. Yeah.
for the time and effort that goes into it. And Sherry, thank you.
We appreciate the offer. Okay. Any questions? We're also available anytime after.
Anyone from the audience have a question? They're saving them for the next meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tom.
Mr. Malone. Now for my report. Under Communications, C1, at the communication received from the Wilkes-Barre Career and Technical School, enclosing copies of its meeting held on March 15th, be acknowledged as received and placed on file. That the communication received from the LIU 18, enclosing copies of its meeting from March 24th, 2021, be acknowledged as received and placed on file. The abatements and additions received from Luzerne County Assessment Office be acknowledged as received and placed on file. C4, our permit to use school facilities for the month. Under Finance, that approval be granted for the purchase of textbooks and supplementary materials for the 2021-2022 school year, following a review and recommendation of the administrative staff and with the approval of the superintendent. F2, that the communication from Dr. Anthony Grieco, Executive Director, LIU 18, submitting the schedule of contracted professional services for 2021-2022 school year in the amount of $674,433.17 be acknowledged as received, approved, and placed on file. F3 will be the proposed final budget for the Pittston Area School District for the fiscal year 2021-2022. F4, that the budget from the Wilkes-Barre Area Career and Technical Center for the fiscal year July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 be acknowledged, received, approved, and placed on file. Under bids, B1, that the Secretary be authorized to advertise for duplicating paper for the 2021-2022 school year. Those bids will be opened on June 17th, 2021 at 11 a.m. in the boardroom of the senior high school. And B2, that the bid for the air purification equipment be awarded to said contractor. General, G1, the tentative list of graduates as submitted by Mr. Chris Lezevnik, principal, be approved, providing they meet all the requirements. G2, that the agreement with Lackawanna College for dual enrollment for 2021-2022 school year be acknowledged as received, approved, and placed on file. G3, that the Pittston Area School District procurement plan on child nutrition programs and the written code of conduct be implemented, that was implemented on April 20th, 2021, be approved and placed on file. That concludes my report.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to proceed to opening of the Pittston Area School District regular school board meeting on Wednesday, May 19th.
We need to go, Doc, new business and public
Oh, I'm
input.
sorry, I didn't give you the opportunity. Any board members with new business?
Yes, Dr. Sereno, I have some new business. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the PTO's recommendation for an outdoor classroom. Motion.
Second. Okay, well, we do that, yeah.
We'll do it in the regular meeting.
All right, John, when we do go through the regular meeting, if you can bring that up at that point, and then we can vote on it? Yes, excellent, you could explain a little bit about it if you'd like. Any other new business or comments from the public? If not, then I'll start again. That the Pittston Area School District regular school board meeting Wednesday, May 19th, 2021, be called to order, and then roll call.
Mr. Anizio?
Present.
Dr. Cooper? Here. Mr. Crawford? Here. Mr. Knick? Absent. Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Rakota? Here. Mr. Salvo?
Here.
And Dr. Sereno.
Here. Board met in exec session on May 19th, 2021 at 5 p.m. in the high school library for the purpose of discussing personnel. I'd like to approve the minutes of the meeting, motion, and a second to approve minutes of the meeting of April 20th, 2021. Motion?
Motion. Second.
Mr. Anizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rakota?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sereno.
Yes. Now I'd like to proceed to the communications. I'll entertain a motion that the communications C1 through C4, as presented by the superintendent, be acknowledged as received, accepted, placed on file, and approved where noted.
Motion.
Second. Mr. Anizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rakota?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sereno.
Yes. Under finance, a motion that finance F1 and F2 be approved. Motion?
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Anizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rakota?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Sereno.
Yes. A motion that finance F3 be approved. And the F3 is the proposed final budget of the Pittston Area School District for the year 2021. And that budget reflects the general fund expenditures of $55,457,783, with a millage rate to be 16.5413 mils, which remains the same. Motion?
Motion. Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
Yes. A motion for F4, that the budget for the Wilkes-Barre Area Career and Technical Center for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021, June 30th, 2022 be acknowledged as received, approved, and placed on file.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
Yes. A motion for B1 to be approved as so presented.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
The bid for the air purification equipment to be awarded to, and before I do that, Joe, Mr. Salvo, would you like just to give a little bit of rundown of what this means, or what we're doing here?
Yes, basically what we're doing is we're installing these, they're called needle point air purifiers, and what they do is, they're put in all the air conditioning, all the heating units, your ventilation system as a whole, and what it does is it breaks down and it kills MRSA, it kills COVID, it kills many different viruses, and we want to upgrade our ventilation system to make the school district safe for all our employees, our students, of course, are first and foremost. And we took a nice, long, hard look at this thing. We had our architect look at several different options, and this was the best option we come up with. And we want to approve it and get this thing off the ground and have it ready for the start of the next school year.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The low bidder would be All Service Right at $260,569,000 with alternative 2, alternative MC2, and MC4 included. Motion?
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
Yes. A motion to approve G1 and G3 as so presented?
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
A motion for the accepting and approving of P1 through P6?
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
Yes. That the following people be appointed to the position of workplace teacher volunteer, salary and benefits as per contractual agreement. Motion?
Motion. Second.
Mr. Nizio?
Yes.
Dr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Rekoda?
Yes.
Mr. Salvo?
Yes.
And Dr. Serena.
Yes. A motion that the finance and business reports FB1 to FB6 for the month of April be accepted as presented and filed.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Nezio.
Yes.
Dr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Ms. Ricotta.
Yes.
Mr. Salvo.
Yes.
Dr. Sereno.
Yes. That would take us to new business?
Yes, Dr. Sereno, I have new business.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Education approves the PTO's proposal for an outdoor classroom at the middle school and intermediate center.
I second that.
Motion? Second? Roll call?
Motion?
Mr. Nezio.
Oh, okay. I thought he was asking for another one, sorry.
Mr. Nezio.
Yes.
Dr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Ms. Ricotta.
Yes.
Mr. Salvo.
Yes.
And Dr. Sereno.
Before we move on,
If I can, based upon that favorable vote, if we can consider entertaining another motion whereby the proper officers of the district would be authorized to execute any and all documents necessary to further the grant application and/or that project, so we don't have to come back at a later meeting.
I'll make that motion.
motion-
Second.
Mr. Nezio.
Yes.
Dr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Ms. Ricotta.
Yes.
Mr. Salvo.
Yes.
And Dr. Sereno.
Before we move on, I just, tonight was the first I heard about the PTO's interest in doing the outdoor classroom. And Kevin, if you could just give them a little bit of detail as to the interest and where they're going with this thing.
The proposal is to put a pole barn that would sit very close to, I believe, the girls softball field that's at the middle school now, behind the garage area. Okay, on the other side of the street. On the school side of the street. Yeah, a pole barn there that would be, serve as an outdoor classroom, but would also be a pavilion that would be there for field day and other activities. That's going to bring more environmental studies and experiences to the students. That not only at the middle school and the intermediate center, but can be utilized by all different grade levels throughout the district. So very worthwhile project, and
I was kind of.
wish them a lot of luck.
Kind of impressed to listen to the presentation. Look forward to seeing it come true. Any new business? Other new business from the
Doc.
board?
I have something.
Yes, sir.
On the contract for the air purification, we never told anybody where the money came from. The money's coming out of COVID, so,
Correct.
Right.
Yes, it's from the federal grant, and it's obviously because of the nature of the problem, and that was the nature of the grant, to provide that type of service. And after months, Mike, you know you've been involved, in looking at what was best for our kids, we all in the beginning wanted to jump right in and do something, okay? Well, it wasn't as simple as that. We spent 4 months, Mike?
yes, it's been a while,
Meeting-
yes.
Meeting with the architect and trying to figure out the best alternative, and we believe we accomplished that tonight. Anyone else? If not, any public input? Not, a motion to adjourn?
Motion.